St. Joseph's College. My name is Joanne Bean. I'm the Vice President for Advancement, and I'm happy to introduce a really exciting topic for this afternoon's discussion. Great to see so many familiar faces, and this will be very exciting. Celebrating Women's History Month, and we have a faculty member who is new to me, certainly. I'm new to the college, and I'm really happy to meet you, Meredith. I'm going to go through some introductions, and then we'll turn everything over to you. So thank you for agreeing to facilitate this discussion. So for those who haven't participated before, we will go through probably about 30 minutes of discussions from our presenters and our panelists, and then we'll allow some time for questions and answers. So we hope that everyone participates, but let's let this go. It's very casual. Let's everyone just enjoy themselves. Put your microphones on mute if you would, if you're not speaking, so that there's no background noise. This is being recorded. It will be on our website, and we'll have an opportunity to just really engage, we hope, in some dialogue about the subject matter at hand. We were really happy to have Meredith Amigai, a professor here at St. Joseph's College. She essentially wants to talk to alumni who have, in fact, graduated and have been very successful in their careers as women. So there are three wonderful panelists that we'll be introducing. And these panelists will just identify, I guess, some of the questions that Meredith has offered for this dialogue. So before I introduce Meredith, let me go ahead and introduce the panelists, if that's okay, and we'll move on. I'm happy to introduce Heather Mullen. Heather is a 1989 graduate. She's originally from Long Island, and she summered here in Maine for years, and then, of course, became in love with the college. She is a graduate that has navigated lots of different career paths, very interesting jobs, and she also serves in a leadership capacity on our Alumni Association board. Heather has volunteered this past year to lead our efforts along with Stephanie Filer, myself, and Bob Zilg in just strengthening our Plan Gift program. So that was really exciting that Heather brought her expertise to that endeavor. She currently holds the role of Vice President of Health Plans for Northern Light Healthcare, where she's approaching her first year anniversary, which is really exciting. So know that she also married a St. Joseph's College alum for 25 years. And this summer, they have two amazing kids that they celebrate the summers with in Maine. And we're really excited that one of them is a recent grad, a 2021 grad. So another panelist is Shayna Webster. Shayna is not necessarily unknown to anybody who walks the campus on Sebago Lake. Shayna has been with us for a number of degrees, 3 in total, in 04, in 10, and in 20. She's the Assistant Dean of Academic Affairs, and she's the Director of Academic Center for Excellence. Just recently, she's been given a number of challenges and charges in that capacity, and has really done a superior job to help all our students become more engaged in experiential learning and to really find that path for where they want to venture in their careers. So it's exciting to have you with us, Shayna. Catherine Rogers. Catherine, we're so happy to see you again. Catherine is a small business owner. She absolutely is known to the campus because in 2019, she was the speaker for our online programs. And it was really nice to see her on commencement give an address to all sorts of parents and eager students who were contemplating whether they would go on for a graduate degree. And I think your words were wonderful back then, Catherine. So good to see you again. In this capacity of 30 years in healthcare administration, you really have had a number of leadership roles that you must be so proud of, and we're proud of you. Most recently, you're at Mercy Hospital, and that's exciting because you're right down the street from us, and we get a chance to see all the hard work, particularly through COVID-19, what you and your colleagues have faced. So I'm happy to have all three panelists. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Meredith Ami Guy. And Meredith is the department chair and the assistant professor for criminal justice. She holds a PhD from the University of New Haven, a postgraduate certificate from John Jay College, and she actually has a baccalaureate degree in science from the College of William and Mary. She has worked at this forensic psychiatric hospital and worked for a few firms, participated in research, and she's involved in a halfway house and also participated in 2 research projects that reviewed the coding information for police files. So before arriving at St. Joseph's College, she taught courses at the University of New Haven. She was the professor and has studied psychology and forensic psychology and criminology. Her research covers homicide and homicide investigations and criminology. She also provides in the classroom and emphasizes social justice and reform and teaches methods of statistics and introductory criminal justice, forensic psychology, criminology, criminal issues, criminal justice, and other criminal justice courses. So a number of really interesting background pieces for you that's brought to our program here at the college, Meredith. And it's such a pleasure to have you with us. Thanks for pulling this together and for your interest to facilitate Front Row with the faculty. Meredith, go right ahead. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Joanne. As you all gathered from that, yeah, if it's criminal justice related at the college, I probably teach it. As such, today's topic is something that I find really important and appealing to me. I teach a lot of young women who are going into very heavily male-dominated fields, policing, corrections, even law. And so I was really excited and thankful to be part of this panel looking at women who have succeeded in traditionally male-dominated fields or roles. And I want to thank Catherine, Victoria, Ashley, and Stephanie for pulling this all together and inviting me to be part of it. Before we get into the panelists, just a quick overview sort of on our inspiration for this afternoon. This is part of our celebration of Women's History Month, highlighting the extraordinary works of some of our very talented and inspiring alumni. And we want to acknowledge the example of the Sisters of Mercy founders, Catherine McCauley, and her work and how that led us to where we are this afternoon, speaking to these extraordinary women. Catherine was a pioneer in her field, forging the way for women who would both accompany her and come after her. She was acutely aware of social, economic, and political oppression in 19th century Dublin, and rather than turn a blind eye to the injustices around her, she dedicated her life and her resources to serving the poor, the sick, and the uneducated. She did so with extraordinary love and compassion. She persisted past naysayers, stereotypical expectations of women, and created something truly revolutionary. Her ministry has grown and multiplied throughout the world, including our little corner of the world here at St. Joseph's. We're inspired by the work of these women, their work that follows the pioneering spirit of Catherine McCauley, and their ability to push past the many challenges and roadblocks that attempt to trip us all up every day, as we strive to do, as Catherine taught, to do ordinary things extraordinarily well. So I'm going to start with a couple of questions for the panelists, and then we'll open it up sort of for the rest of you to offer some questions and some discussion. So panelists, let's start. How did your time at St. Joseph's as a student prepare you for the work that you're doing today? Oops, sorry, there we go. I don't know if you guys want me to call on people or you just want to sort of unmute yourself and volunteer. Okay. Shayna, why don't we start with you? You're first on my screen.
Joanne, thank you for your kind words during your introduction. I very much love the college and am very happy and proud to have been asked to be here today. So thank you. I think what's interesting when I hear you ask that question, I'm not sure how many people understand that higher ed is a job that you can bust into, I guess, for lack of a better term. So, you know, during my time as a student, I was pursuing my degree and really didn't give much thought to what working in a field like this would look like. I headed out and was doing work in insurance and quickly realized that that was not what was my burning desire. and understood that to, I think, navigate the world of work, needing to go back and pursue a degree and coming to realize that the value of education that I had as an undergraduate really drove me to understand that pursuing a graduate degree was going to propel me into a world that got me really excited. And drawing from my relationships with my peers and faculty and staff during my time as an undergraduate, coming back here meant so much to me, and really keeping those connections alive.
Thank you. Catherine, how did your time at SJC prepare you?
So, as I mentioned when I spoke at graduation, I graduated from undergraduate school, I think before most of the students were born. And I pointed out to them that Jimmy Carter, who everyone knows as the Habitat for Humanity fellow, was actually his term in office was the last time I'd taken economics. So after having 30 years of experience in healthcare, I had the opportunity we had some changes happening. My husband and I moved to North Carolina. I left Mercy Hospital, which I loved very much. And it was that opportunity, that space that I was able to say, you know what, it's really time for me now that my kids have gone through undergraduate school and graduate school. My husband is through with medical school and all of that training and all that practice. And it was a chance for me to go back to school. And so I chose St. Joe's and used that opportunity to go back to school. And it was terrifying because I hadn't been in school for a long time. The internet did not exist before when I was in undergraduate school. And so I was really anxious going into it. But I have to say that it was the most wonderful and unique experience that I'd ever had. I loved the faculty. I loved immersing myself in it, and really found that actually all of those years of work experience enhanced the program when I went through it. And I would say that the things that I took away from it most profoundly were in the MBA program, the leadership MBA program. Servant leadership is a very important underlying theme, and that was hugely important to me and something that I carried forward. And actually, after I graduated from that program, I did a complete career change. And where I am right now is in my yarn shop. It's completely different than healthcare. But I think that kind of going out of my comfort zone, going back to graduate school, immersing myself, and looking at the world through a different lens was really, really important, and not something that a lot of people in my age group do. But I would encourage people to go back to school and take that plunge, even as frightening as it seems to be, because it's really life-changing. And that experience allowed me to step back and say, you know, at this point in my life, if I could do anything at all, what would I do? Be an entrepreneur, try something totally different, something that ties into something that I'm passionate about. I love fiber. I've been a lifelong knitter. And how do I take the things that I've learned in this program and apply them to something completely different than what I've done for the last 30 years? And so it was life-changing for me, because even though a lot of the pieces of the MBA program certainly aren't specific to how do you open a small business, like how do I deal with Verizon? How do I deal with Spectrum? How do I get internet in here? How do I become my own IT department and all of the things? I mean, it doesn't have that kind of detail, but what it does do is teach you that there are a lot of resources out in your community, and whether it began with the faculty or whether now in my new community down in North Carolina, you know, how do I reach out to other people that are experts? And I think that program gave me the courage to do that, because towards the tail end of my program at St. Joe's, I took myself on field trips. Depending on what class I was in, I would just call local business leaders and say, I'm in this graduate program and we're studying whatever the class was at the time, and I'd like to spend time at the elbow with your chief financial officer. And people opened their doors and they opened their minds, and it was awesome And then I would write about them because that program is all based on writing. And so I would write all these great things about my field trips. So, but that did really prepare me. So when I opened my own business, I need to rely on a lot of other people. It's just me here, but I'm not an island. I need a lot of help from other people to pull the whole thing off. So that's kind of a noisy way to get through all of this. That's how I ended up here.
That's awesome. I'm glad that it gave you the courage to branch out. It sounds like both of you actually sort of the courage to branch out and try something different that you weren't expecting to do. Heather, maybe, I don't know if you're going to continue that trend.
I'm definitely going to continue that trend. I mean, when I think back to college, you know, I don't think you can underestimate just what everyone gains by being independent for the first time. If you're an on-campus student and what that's like as an 18-year-old, I think that seeing my kids go through that now, it's a good reminder. So I don't think you can underestimate just the simplicity of that. But for me, I can pinpoint very specific experience that I had at St. Joe's that I was part of student government, but I was just sort of you know, I don't even remember what my role was. It was a long time ago. But I was asked because someone had to step down. Oh, sorry. Can you guys mute the?
We have some background noise.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's coming from an office, Stephanie.
Because we have panelists that are alums.
I think you can.
Trying to.
I don't know if the.
I hear Mary Ellen.
Yeah. I don't know if the someone can mute from like the administrator.
Anyway, I'm just providing
The
number.
let's see.
I'll have to leave it running.
Stephanie, do you hear that background noise?
So.
Mary Ellen, could you mute, please?
Let's see if we can get someone to mute.
No, I was trying to think. Usually, sometimes the administrator can
Yeah, I think it has to be whoever started the call.
has that power. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I was involved in student government when I was a student at St. Joe's, and I was just a committee member. And the person who was president at the time, for reasons I can't even remember, had to step down or left. And I was asked to actually step in as the president of the Student Government Association. And I remember thinking, oh my God, why me? I have no idea, you know, how to run the meeting in the ways in which you need to run a meeting. I just really felt out of my comfort zone. But I remember thinking, well, someone believes I can do this because they asked me to. And so I am going to lean in and I'm going to do it. And, you know, I probably wasn't the best student government president St. Joe's ever had, but I did the job and I learned a lot. And when I think about my career, some of the greatest moments and greatest advances for me, learning moments for me, were when I leaned into experiences that I thought, oh my gosh, there's no way I can do that. And early on in my career, people believed in me more than I believed in myself. And so I just would jump in. You know, later in my career, I have a little more faith in myself. And so it's less apprehension, but there's still a lot of reward and I think fun to be had when you lean into something that's that you don't think you can do. And it started at that moment, my senior year, when I had that opportunity. And then I think, and other people have mentioned this, just the community that I had at St. Joe's, both with students and with faculty. I had a job with the faculty secretary, and so I got to interact with the professors on a regular basis. And so it made them seem more like real people to me, which you don't often think about when you're the student. And so I think all of those experience, you know, I often say to my teams that we all just have a different job. Like the titles, I've never been a title kind of searcher or seeker. And, you know, we all just have different jobs. And so it's the same thing when I learned that, wow, these professors are just people too, who care about and have a different role than I do. And they're here to help. It's things that have carried me forward. So same theme.
That's awesome to hear as a professor, because I do enjoy those interactions with our students, and I hope that some of them are coming away with these experiences too. So, that's awesome.
Have
It
them
sounds
call
like,
me if not.
yes, I will. Our current student faculty or student body president is one of my students, actually, I think. Random. You know, at the college, we put a lot of emphasis on trying to live these core values: faith, excellence, integrity, respect, community, compassion, and justice. And so I would ask the panelists, was there a particular value that has, more than the others, sort of shaped your approach to work or life in general after leaving the college? Let me go in the reverse order this time. Heather, why don't you start?
Yeah, I was contemplating this question a bit. Thanks for giving us a little bit of a heads up so I could think about this. But I really think that all of the values together are really an excellent recipe for life, whether it's your personal life or your professional life. I'm not sure if I think at different times in my life, I lean on different pieces of those values to guide me. There's times when I might need to remind myself to be more compassionate or patient, especially, I work in healthcare. This has been, even though I'm not on the front lines, but I'm part of the system. And, so reminding people and being extra compassionate, I think you got to think about that with just customer service in general. People are understaffed no matter what kind of industry they're in. There's certainly times I lean more on my faith to help me get through tough times. So I don't think I can pick just one. I think I lean on one more or less in certain circumstances. And I think they all really are a perfect blend for how we should approach life and personal life and professional life.
That's an awesome way of looking at it. Catherine, how about you? Anyone that stands out?
Well, yes. For me, community is really important. It's interesting. When I started the online program, one of my fears was I wasn't going to be in a classroom. I was all the way down in North Carolina, and I was in a strange place. And how was I going to relate to faculty? And how was I ever going to relate to these other students in a largely online program? And it's amazing the community that emerges out of that program, because as you march through the generally 3 years and the progression of classes, you are with the same people. And even though your correspondence with them generally is just in responding to that Socratic response of questions, you learn about these different people because they talk about their experiences and their life history and how that relates to whatever the class is. And it's amazing to me that, having rarely set foot on campus, that I left that program actually with a very strong community of both faculty who I admired very much, my advisor who I loved, the program director who I loved, and a core group of students who kind of marched that march with me. And even though we all held very different roles, most of us were in healthcare, not all of us were, but we developed this wonderful friendship that I just never thought was going to be possible in a program like that. But the theme of community and also respect are two that I carry forward with me, because look at the world around us right now. That's what's missing, is a sense of respect for other people. I think that's at the root of a lot of what we see, whether it's through the internet and social media or even face to face. It feels like the world is kind of a mean place sometimes. So we need more of the core values of respect that we see in a place like St. Joseph's. And community is everything. I would say to the graduates, you can't get through this life without community. Community is very important. The community at Mercy Hospital was priceless to me, within my department and within the facility as a whole. When I moved to this new community, the first thing I did was establish a sense of community. Who are my resources? Who are going to be the people that I pull in close around me? Because that's how any of us move forward and have a satisfying existence. So those are the two that are most important to me.
That's great. And I keep noticing everybody mentioning community. And since our new sort of slogan at the college is where community grows, I'm really happy to see that people feel like we're sort of living that. Shayna, you're still with us. So I imagine the core values are, you know, an everyday thing for you, but tell us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming up on my 17th year professionally with the college. And, you know, I look back to my time as a student, and I would agree with Heather. You know, I think it's really hard to pinpoint one particular aspect of what the core values are, to really say that's a driving factor, because I think at the heart of what they are, they're a moral compass, right? We're utilizing these every day in our interactions with students and other staff and our faculty and our community partners, and just the way we move through our experiences. I guess if I had to drill one down, I would say the pursuit of excellence, because, you know, I look at the people who have helped shape me and the leader that I am at this point. And, you know, I'm very thankful for their ability to believe in me and see beyond what I couldn't see. And I feel very blessed to be in a position where I have staff working for me and feel like I can provide them a baseline and an opportunity to see in themselves what I see in them. And so, you know, the core values for me, I think, are really at the heart of every decision that we're making. And really, you know, this campus embodies that. However you come to the table, in whatever faith capacity, you know, you're joining our community, I think at the heart of what we're doing, we are living and breathing them.
Awesome. One last question from me, and then I'll open it up. I guess Karen had to go. I'll open it up to everybody else. What advice would you share with our upcoming graduates? I don't know if there's actually any on the call, but particularly for the young women that are getting ready to leave St. Joe's and go out into the world. Catherine, let's start with you this time.
Great. I would say advocate for yourself, always. Advocate for yourself. Be kind. Be brave. I would say, to the extent that you can, look at change as opportunity, because too many people look at change as something that takes something away from you. And I would take the opposite approach. Change is an opportunity to find something new. Speak up for yourself. You have a voice. Don't let anyone ever take it away from you. Look for opportunities to serve. I'm a very active board member on the local United Way, and we've done a community action program, the Community Care Collaborative, that reaches out to people in our community who are in that awful place between making just a little bit too much to be in poverty and not enough to get by, and a flat tire away from disaster. So look for opportunities to serve, because servant leadership is really, really important. Yeah, that would be my advice.
All great advice. Shayna, how about you?
I would say to our graduating students, to know your worth. I think it's really important to understand within yourself your own value and what you bring to the table, and really honoring, I can't remember who said it, maybe Heather, but, you know, having confidence in the fact that when you've been asked to the table, you know, that there's a reason why your voice wants to be heard, and what you bring to that. And I think having confidence in that, I mentioned this just because it was something that really meant so much to me, given the timing of this, but I had lunch with a member of our senior leadership the other day who invited me out to just thank me for my contributions to the college and acknowledge, you know, the responsibility that I have and my motivation and my passion for giving 110%. And I was humbled, you know, by the experience, and very grateful to have that opportunity to have somebody say, like, we see you and we see how hard you're working. And it felt really good, because everybody is doing such great work across the campus right now. And I think the more that we can build each other up, we're going to continue to see really good things happening.
Absolutely. Heather?
funny, as they were talking, I'm like, oh, that was on my list. That was on my list. I think I can't echo more strongly the things that Catherine and Shayna all said, and I would just add a couple small things to it. I think being curious is a good thing. I think asking questions and being humble. And the embrace change, I just can't cheerlead enough. A couple, like another layer down, a couple of other notes that I wrote that have helped me. I remember the first time I got promoted from a manager to a director, and I had been a manager for a long time, like 7 years or something. And I remember thinking, I'm ready, I can be a director. And I remember going to the first couple meetings and being like, wow, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this. And I remember my boss at the time, one of the greatest bosses I've ever had, said to me, Heather, you belong at that table. So anytime you start to feel doubt, use the mantra in your head that I belong. And it didn't take much time of that mantra to help really kind of shift my mindset. And so I think, like you said, Shayna, when you can lean into people who can help support you, that's a really good thing. I think seeking to understand is huge, and not not making assumptions. And one of my favorite questions that I ask in meetings all the time are, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? Because I think oftentimes you'll realize there's not alignment on that question, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It then usually becomes a really great thing to answer that question. But that, I think, is a way to show curiosity, humble. It's a way to demonstrate all the things that we've all been saying. And you'll be surprised that people aren't always aligned on what the problem is that you're trying to solve. And through that work and alignment, mountains can be moved. So
I'm going to play this part of the recording on loop for my students. Like this is all great advice. So I'd love to open it up to the rest of the people here. I think there's probably few enough of us that you could just unmute yourself and ask the question. If we want to go that way, please do. Or you could raise your hand. I think Zoom has a little hand raising thing if you prefer.
I have a question. This is Stephanie. So maybe for Ashley and Victoria, after hearing some of the experiences and some of the comments from the panelists, you are both working with a lot of our seniors as they are completing internships and maybe looking at job interviews as they start to graduate. Are there some common questions that maybe they're asking or thoughts that they have that maybe you could throw out to the panelists that would help answer, that you could take back to those students and give them some of the advice that maybe Heather or Catherine or Shayna could help, provide them some additional support or advice as they kind of move forward into that next phase?
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I work with a lot of students who are recently, they're getting ready to graduate. They're gearing up for mock interviews. They're coming in for resume reviews and cover letters. And I would say a common theme that I'm noticing, particularly in young women, is a lack of confidence and a lack of, it comes down to confidence, I think, and believing, there's a certain element of imposter syndrome sort of going on. Am I ready for this? Do I have the skills? And, it's interesting because I noticed during mock interviews, there's a lot of language circling around, I think, and I believe I can. And people have told me this rather than I am, I can, and I will. And I wonder if our panelists might be able to speak to that a little bit further and maybe just provide some advice for, how to kind of get over that layer of self-doubt and a lack of confidence that students might be struggling with.
When I hear you say that, the word resiliency comes to mind. I think from probably professional development, for ourselves, the ability to know that we can do hard things is a skill that is easier said than done. and having the ability to change that narrative. Exactly what you just said, Ashley, you know, from little words that in their cover letter show that they are confident in what they do. But I think, you know, given the world that we've been living in for the last couple of years, I think it's really hard for some of our students, in part because they don't feel like their experience is done yet, right? And so they're kind of hanging on to not wanting this moment to be gone, but preparing for a world that we're still figuring out ourselves in terms of what they're going to be looking like. So I think it's really important, you know, that you're talking to them about that narrative.
I'll jump in here a little bit. When I was at Mercy, I ran the hospital medicine service. And so I was at different times recruiting young physicians and young PAs and NPs. And, you know, a lot of them, particularly the PAs and NPs, were coming right out of training. And as the director, when I interviewed them, I did not expect them. I mean, I knew they were coming right out of training. And what I was looking for was someone who was curious, eager to keep learning. I didn't assume that they were going to know everything, and I didn't want them to necessarily know everything, but what I did want them to be was open to learning things and not assume that they were going into it. So if that makes sense, I was looking for people who would be a good team player, who communicated well, and were eager to learn. Those were key for me, but I didn't expect them to be, you know, an experienced PA or NP right out of the barn. Nobody is. And so for the students graduating from the undergraduate program, nobody expects you to have 10 years of experience because you don't have it, right? But you need, in an interview situation, to be able to convey, I want to be a part of a team. I'm looking forward to what I can bring, but as I bring this forward and learn new things to create, you know, an experience here. So that's what my advice would be.
Yeah, I've interviewed lots of people and would echo 1000% what you just said, Catherine. I think authenticity is what comes through in an interview, and I think that's what gets people further, especially to your point, Catherine, about someone just out of college. They don't expect them. So it's all about being authentic and not trying to pretend you're something that you're not, or you know, being real goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Agreed.
I think something I've noticed, and I don't necessarily work with fourth year students probably as much as Ashley does, but something I'm recognizing is people are getting overwhelmed with the amount of choices that they have. And I'm curious from your perspective, what sorts of things should a graduating senior look for when they're choosing between multiple jobs and multiple positions? What would your advice be for helping them make a decision on what feels right for them?
I think to the extent that they can do a little bit of research and figure out what the team is going to look like and how you are as a person. I mean, some people are introverts and are sort of solo sort of players, but if you're someone who is looking for a team, I would do a little bit of work to figure out what that team looks like. And the other piece of advice that I would give them interviewing, which somebody told me early on, and for me, it was an epiphany. When you go on an interview, so many people think I'm going on an interview, they are interviewing me, but it's a two-way street. And so I would tell your students, when they go on this interview, be prepared to also be asking questions and look forward to say, tell me about your team, tell me about this work environment, and let that potential employer sell their role as well. Too often it becomes one-sided and then it feels lopsided and you come out of an interview situation feeling a little bit destabilized. But I think if you go into it saying, I'm interviewing the interviewer as much as they're interviewing me, it's a game changer.
I would say to a student that, life is certainly all about choices, right? And it's not always the time to go the safe route. I met with a student the other day who was faced with a couple of different options, and I'm all about what sets your soul on fire and being realistic to understand that we're not all going to fall into that job immediately, right? We know we're preparing students for 3 to 4 different careers and pathways, and their road is going to look like this, like the rest of ours did. But finding a balance of what sets your heart on fire, what the world needs, and where is that middle ground to find happiness, because nobody wants to be in a job they don't love doing. I can tell you with certainty that even on my worst days, I love coming to work. I love what I do. I'm passionate about it. It feels good. Having been a student here, I want our students' experience to be the absolute best that it can be. And drawing from what my experiences were, I know that there are areas that we can do better, right? And so having an opportunity to say to students, like, don't be complacent, don't go the safe road, choose something that's going to make you happy. And I find most of the time that students, I think, have an idea of what that means to them. I think they're just hesitant for what that other road would look like. But my grandmother always used to say something, and it has stuck with me, that the grass is not greener on the other side, it's greener where you water it. And so making the best of your experience is something that I think we all have the choice to do.
Oh my God, I love that quote, That's awesome. Yeah, you can't underestimate the power of your gut either. I think it's so basic and simple, but the first job I ever had out of college, and I've never done this ever again in my career, but after like 4 days, I quit because I said, this is not what I wanted. I always thought coming out of college, I wanted to be in the hospitality industry. And, so I worked, I got a job at a hotel, but it was not what I wanted to do. And even though I knew you have to build to your ultimate career, so I'm not suggesting I walked in saying I should run the place, but that's not my personality anyway. But I just knew it just didn't feel right. And I ended up in healthcare, which is sort of like hospitality. I'm not a physician, I'm in the administration side of things, but there's I think a component of humanness and compassion that you need to build into operations. So I feel like I'm getting my bucket filled, but my gut spoke to me very right. And I could have spent a long time there and not been happy.
I think one of the things that I would add to that, and that's an excellent point, is that you are going to have jobs that you don't love. And so my advice would be, don't be afraid to leave a job that you don't love. But also, I think you have a responsibility to learn from the job that you don't love also, because you need to come away from that experience and say, there are some silver linings. What did I learn? What did I learn about myself? What did I learn about my capability, my belief system? I mean, people leave jobs for a lot of different reasons, but the real learning experience is to be honest with yourself and sit back and say, what was it about that was not right, so that you go in a different, it kind of opens up going in a different direction the next time. And that's valuable. I mean, I don't think that it's a life fully lived, honestly, if you haven't done a job that you hated. I mean, my husband is a general surgeon, and he was at Mercy also. And he learned more working at a box factory outside of Buffalo as a college, summer student. He learned a lot from that. And he would tell anyone coming along behind him that there are things to be learned from jobs that you hate, I shouldn't say hate, jobs that you decide that you would not like to do for the rest of your life. And so all of us have had those experiences, and we walk away from them for a lot of different reasons, but you do the best service to yourself if you use some introspection and say, what did I learn from that, and how will that help me grow? But don't be afraid as you're interviewing, what if this job doesn't turn out to be what I want it to be? That's okay. You're going to learn something from it anyway.
I don't know if I'm allowed to contribute, but I do feel like a lot of students feel like they have to know exactly what they're going to do for the rest of their life, before they leave us. And, I didn't go back for my PhD till I was 34. So, I've had similar experiences to some of our panelists where you just go where life takes you, right? And it's perfectly fine to not have any idea when you're 21 what you're going to do for the rest of your life. Great questions and advice. Anybody else in the audience with a question? I have a few more.
I was going to ask a question about the aspect of listening. I find that so oftentimes in the interview process in particular, if you're the candidate, particularly if you're young and inexperienced in interviewing, you tend to get so geared up to giving information and maybe not quite listening to what's being asked of you. Do you find that our young students need some guidance that maybe the panelists or others on the call can provide for that?
I think that that's something that's not unique just to students. I mean, from when I counseled my staff or when my husband counsels his patients, there are people at all different ages for whom sometimes hearing is easy, listening is hard. Interpreting what you've heard is hard, and it's very difficult if certainly when you're young and inexperienced. But that is a very good point, and I would encourage students going into an interview to take a deep breath and truly listen to what the person is saying. And that's easier said than done, but I think that is very good advice. And it is a little bit easier if you go in again saying, there's information I need from you as well, as we go through this sort of two-way street that an interview really should be.
I would say this probably applies to all of us professionally, but Dave Vlisher told me something in a meeting several years ago, and on my notepad before every meeting, I write down the word wait, and it reminds me, why am I talking? And it has served me so well when I go to meetings to be able to listen, and before I speak, ask myself, is what I'm about to say going to add value to this conversation? And not even so much in an interview, but I think just in general, the ability to have your voice and have confidence and know that your contributions are well intended, don't always necessarily meet the expectation that you had in your mind. And so that's one of my favorite exercises. I told him I might tattoo it on my forehead so I don't forget.
I think your point about that you're not just a young student, but I just last week was coaching somebody that I work with to listen to hear, not to respond. And this person's not, just out of college. And so I think it's important, and I just will echo, I think ensuring that what you're going to provide adds value and you're not just talking because you think you have to, is another important component.
So Ray Brown offered a very nice quote from Abraham Lincoln: better to remain quiet and thought a fool than to speak up and remove all doubt. How true.
Yeah.
How true. I'd like to ask a question of Sister Mary George, if I could, please. Hello, Sister. Nice to have you with us. As a Sister of Mercy at St. Joseph's College for decades, can you give some perspective of, all of the wonderful women that you have seen graduate and those who certainly still call upon you today? I know very well that you receive all sorts of communications, particularly from very successful women like the women that are on this panel today. What do you find about our graduates that are so special, Sister? And maybe what words of wisdom can you share with all of us, please?
I love our graduates, and listening to the people this afternoon, I want to go back to the classroom because I just love students. And every piece of advice that you people have been offering to us this afternoon, I'm here nodding, yes, yes. Especially interviewing, knowing that it's a two-way street. And also, if it's not really fulfilling, look elsewhere, but look elsewhere nicely. And also, don't forget to never talk negatively about a place that you are thinking of leaving. Always leave the people who are not satisfying you, leave them in a good place in the eyes of what you hope will be your new employer. I don't know, I just, I taught here in the Department of Sociology, that's where my doctorate is. And some of my graduates have turned up into very high level positions, but they've never forgotten where they came from. They've never forgotten who they are. They were always very generous, remembering their roots. And of course, it always thrilled me when one of the roots I always remembered was St. Joseph's College. And of course, me. There's also the idea that it's just what you people said this afternoon. I want more of it. You talked about the core values. I was also the vice president for mission and sponsorship. And when I came on, I was the first person in that position for St. Joe's College. And I really didn't know what I was supposed to be doing because it was a brand new position. It had not existed before. And in the last line of our mission statement, it said that whatever we do here, we do it in a value-centered environment. My question was, what are our values? What are our values? And so we had a task force and we engaged the whole community to write down the values that they felt made up the complexion of St. Joseph's College. And it was a long procedure because probably our first take, we probably got 147 different values that St. Joseph's should be standing up for. But then as my committee filtered them out, we found that kindness and goodness and there are many terms to describe the same value. So we reduced them to a more meaningful list, etc. And we finally ended up with the 7 that you people were mentioning this afternoon. And one thing to know is that if you are emphasizing one, all the values interface with one another. They're not separate values. If you're compassionate, it means you also have to be just, though. I know that I had personally a very difficult question put to me during the Vietnam War. And my male student said, "Sister, if I don't pass your course, I'm going to have to be drafted." Well, that's a pretty heavy thing to decide, that if I'm going to have to give him a passing rank, and he really shouldn't have gotten it. Where does that, and I'm sending him off to his death. That was a very hard position to be in. Anyway, I'm not going to tell you what I did, but he's still living. Anyway, my dear people, I just want to thank you for what I heard this afternoon. And Meredith, you did a fine piece of work talking about Catherine McCauley. And you summarized her quite nicely. So thank you.
I want to give some credit to Catherine for helping write those remarks as well. That was, Catherine Cody helped with that quite a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I think we just have a few minutes left. So sort of one wrap-up question for the panelists. Work has changed a lot in the last 2 or 3 years. Sort of how has the meaning of work sort of changed for you as you've gone through your lives and your careers? I imagine it's quite different from what you expected when you were first leaving your undergraduate studies. Heather, start with you.
Yeah, This is interesting because I think not only has work changed as I've just gotten older, but it's changed with the pandemic. It's changed as I became a mom. It changed as my kids now are one graduated from college, one is a freshman in college, and I try really hard not to ask them, "What are you going to do?" Because I I know that the pressure that feels. But I think I used to put work maybe too high on my priority list. And I'm not suggesting you shouldn't give it your all and you shouldn't work really hard and you shouldn't, give 100% when you're there. But I think I put a lot in, and when I had about a year and a half ago, a job change, I realized, I ranked it too high. And so I think now I give it 150% every day. I love what I do. I can't wait to contribute. I feel good when I contribute, but when I log off, I try to log off, and I remember that, I want to put time into myself. I want to put time into my kids. I want to put time in with my husband. And I think making sure you have the right integration. I don't really call it balance because I think that inherently means that it's equal. I think it's, how do you find the right transition of work and life? And I think that's really changed for me in the last couple of years. And that doesn't mean I don't still, have high aspirations and I want to continue to contribute, because that's all still part of my DNA. But I think about it differently. And I think the pandemic I think that's been a silver lining of the pandemic. I think people realize, people can contribute from home, and for lots of people that works way better. I think people have thought about the workspace different, and I think that's a good thing.
Shayna, how has work changed for you?
I think it's funny. I had this conversation not that long ago. I'm raising 2 daughters, and the topic of this session that we're having today, I think that similar to Heather, right? I show up every day, I give 110%. If it's a responsibility that's been given to me, I want to do the best that I can. But I want my kids more than anything to understand the time I've invested and the opportunities that it's afforded me in being able to serve the college in the way that I do. I was actually home earlier today because the girls had a half day and came over for this meeting, and my oldest, who's 11, was like, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going to work for a panel that I'm on." And she was like, "Mom, that's really cool." And having an opportunity for her to see me in that way, I think is probably the most motivating factor that I can have in showing up every day and doing what I say that I'm going to do, because I know who's watching and observing how I'm doing that.
Catherine?
Yeah, that's very true. I certainly felt that when I went back to graduate school after a long time. My kids had just finished graduate school and they were like, "Our mom is going to school. This is crazy." I would say work is who we are. And because we change over the course of our life, I think work changes. I know work changes with us. So for me, it has always been a reflection of where I was in a point of time. The person who was at work before children, the person who was at work through having children, and then after my children fledged. And I think at this point in my, I know that at this point in my life, I realize that there are no dress rehearsals, and you have to be, at this point in my life, I have to be doing something that I'm passionate about and something that I love, that gets me out of bed. And work has always been something that was very important to me, but it plays a different role at different times in our lives. And I think, as I mentioned before, change is opportunity, and it's great to embrace change and appreciate that work can change. And I think for the people who made it most successfully through COVID for people that were able to adapt to that, because the change was going to happen no matter what. And how we do is reflected on how we're able to deal with that change. The one other thing that I would say about COVID and what it did for work is I think a lot of us took stock and valued a lot of other jobs more highly than we probably ever did. Think about how we felt when suddenly some of the service jobs that we'd taken for granted forever weren't available. People weren't doing those jobs. And instead of being outraged that we couldn't get more toilet paper or whatever we were out of at the time, isn't it more important to say, wow, I really appreciate the value in those roles because we all are benefiting from it. So I think it was a little bit of a press the restart button to kind of appreciate other people and respect what everybody brings to the table, because everybody's job, regardless of what it is really important.
Absolutely. Well, I think that it's 5 o'clock. So thank you so much to all of our panelists. It was wonderful hearing your stories and your advice. Thank you to the people who came to join us today. I don't know, Joanne, if you have any closing remarks, but this has been wonderful. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
It's really a wonderful program. Thank you for putting it together, Meredith, and thanks for all our panelists and our participants. I'm so happy that it's recorded because these comments are going to be sliced and diced and placed all over the place. I'm only guessing that Ray Brown is smiling right now because as our enrollment officer, you all did us so proud, your comments. Thanks very much. And have a great evening. And don't forget, our Giving Day is this Friday, March 18th. And I think you're all going to read a really incredible message from our president that is going out this afternoon. That is another reflection of the St. Joseph's College community and what it can do for everyone who is in need in Ukraine. So we hope to have you all participate. God bless. Take care. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.